Okay, everybody, we are going to get started. My name is Lisa Kanarish. I am a member of the executive board, and I'm going to be filling in for Kim tonight. If you haven't had a chance yet, we have some index cards on the table for questions to submit for the Q&A with Dr. Menzel. And let's get started. If you all please rise, we'll do the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, and I'm going to read our land acknowledgement. As we gather for this meeting, let us take a moment to reflect on the meaning of place, and in doing so, recognize the various traditional lands on which we do our business today. We wish to acknowledge this land on which this SPC meeting is taking place. For thousands of years, it has been the traditional land of the Hohokam, the Akamela Odom, and most recently, the Salt River Pima Indian community. Today, this place is still the home to many indigenous people from across Maricopa, and we are grateful to have the opportunity to live and work on this land. All right, our agenda. First up, we are going to do a Q&A with Dr. Menzel. So does anybody have any other questions to add? All right, let's start it. Okay. It's been 2 months since SSOs have been approved and started taking shifts. Is there any early data such as percentage of shifts filled, recurrence of SSO at same school, anecdotal remarks from the SSOs, or school admin?
I'd love to have that card.
Yes,
I'll have to
it's a
check with
lot.
Josh Friedman to be able to answer those questions. I know we had some initial indicators of some revolving door, and of course, the more consistent you can be with the same people, the better it is, because that's how you build the relationship with the students and the staff. So I'll have to do some checking to see if we can get data for all of the schools that got the SSOs.
Okay, great.
School safety officer. So the grant funding initially was for school resource officers. The school safety officer is still a police officer, but someone who might be from a different jurisdiction, not necessarily from SPD, although many off-duty SPD officers will pick up an SSO shift, but that creates part of a challenge. The ultimate goal is if you have the SROs, you've got a constant person on the campus, makes it a lot easier, but the police department didn't have capacity to fill all the schools with SROs, which is why we accepted the money for the SSOs.
Okay, next. When will the updated sex education curriculum begin? Will it be opt-in, and for which grades?
It is opt-in. It will be for grades 5, 7, and 9, and we will have an option for participation before the end of this school year. And I was looking at the calendar, there's really 5 weeks left. I mean, it is going very fast, and that last week almost doesn't count, so a month of school. But yes, the plan is still to offer it this year, and then because it's opt-in, we're working on what's the process for next year to give parents advance notice of being able to sign up.
All right. Federal funding for education is expected to be cut. Do you know how much the cuts will be and how it will affect SUSD?
So the answer is, if anyone knows how much the cuts will be, please let us know. We've seen a lot of different estimates, and we've also seen the federal government clawing back funds that have already been appropriated. The good news for us right now is that we aren't the victim of clawback funding. We've seen different numbers for the impact on title funding. So Title I in particular, the first time was a $400,000 number. The next estimate dropped that almost in half, or maybe a little bit more than half. So it's a moving target. The funding, the federal funding cycle is October to September. So our funding through September 30th, unless there's a clawback provision for Titles 2, 3, and 4, will likely remain the same. The Congress, when they did their continuing resolution, protected Title I and protected IDEA, so the administration doesn't have discretion to reduce those dollar amounts. They do have some discretion on the other title funding, so it creates some level of uncertainty, but 2, 3, and 4 are much smaller dollar amounts. Title I and IDEA are bigger dollar amounts. And I think this is where people need to make it, known to our elected officials in DC that funding for kids in poverty and funding for kids with IEPs is really important to the educational enterprise. And it would be a shame to have the federal government walk back from a commitment that they've made since the 60s for Title I, and IDEA has been around a long time, and the federal government's never even honored its commitment to fund 40% of the cost of special education. I think we're at 13% now. So there's a battle to be waged to defend the investments in our kids who need the most support.
All right, thank you. Okay. Oh,
Yes.
somebody have a question?
Have you had to adjust any expenditures or programs in anticipation of it, or have you already been affected?
So for budgeting for next year, we've taken into account some level of declining revenue, largely based on our ADM, but we're monitoring the average daily membership, so that's how we get our primary funding from the state. And then we're monitoring these other sources of funding. We knew that ESSER was gone, that's been accounted for. The the State and Federal Grants Department has been looking at, okay, what adjustments would we need to make if the projected reductions in funding materialize? And so that planning's taking place. Again, our goal is to make sure that the impact is as far removed from the classroom and direct services as we can, but the higher the number, the greater the likelihood that it will impact some level of staffing. But we have not made those decisions yet, largely because we don't know the number and we have funding through September 30th, so there could be some mid-course corrections if the federal government doesn't at least hold the funding steady.
Okay. The aggregate expenditure limit was waived by the AZ legislature for the current school year. Do you know what will happen for the 2025-2026 school year?
So the expectation, there is legislation out there by Representative Gress, and the expectation is that the legislature and governor will do the same thing they did last year. So when the AEL first came up a few years ago, they did not approve the waiver until later in the cycle, which would have had dramatic effect on us. We would have had to cut our funding by 17% after March 1st. That was pretty dramatic. They came through and passed it, but what happened subsequent to that is they've decided not to play political football with the funding that the legislature appropriates. So they've combined, we have the budget approval and the AEL waiver that are moving on parallel tracks so that we get the AEL waiver at the same time the budget is approved. That's the expectation again this year. That could go off the rails and it could be politicized, but for the last 2 years, they've taken that approach, which is a common sense and appropriate approach, and hopefully that will materialize again.
Okay. Oh, surprise, another funding question. We know there will be federal funding cuts for education, but what is the outlook for state funding and how will it affect SUSD?
So state funding, there are a couple of things. One, the way the formula is built, the legislature is required to give up to a 2% increase. They call it an inflationary increase, but if you pay any attention to inflation, that's not even close. And there are some other triggers in Prop 123 language that would allow them not to give that 2%, but we haven't crossed the threshold for those triggers. So it's anticipated that the funding for schools, the base level funding, goes up by 2%. When you're declining enrollment, that's offset by the fact that you're bringing in less revenue. So from a net perspective, that 2% not only doesn't cover inflation, we also don't have more money because we're not growing. If we were Queen Creek or Buckeye where they have more students, then they see the benefit of that. But any district that's been declining in enrollment, it's still not enough to kind of hold the line. The other challenge in state funding is policy decisions over the last few years since I've been here have reduced the revenue stream that would fund public education. Decisions that were made with respect to how people are taxed, decisions with respect to universal vouchers. So we have nearly $1 billion that are supporting ESAs. And I'm a fan of school of choice, but I'm not a fan of taxpayer dollars being used without transparency and accountability. And in Scottsdale, at the end of the last school year, 84% of the ESAs that were claimed by residents in Scottsdale were people who had never attended our schools. 84% were people already attending private and parochial schools. So when you have $1 billion of taxpayer resources being shifted from the traditional district school system to unaccountable, non-transparent ESA expenditures, that's a problem. So it's not that there's no money at the state level. It's about how the legislature has chosen to appropriate it. And I think that it's fair to demand accountability and transparency for all taxpayer dollars. Educational savings accounts or empowerment scholarship accounts, or otherwise known as vouchers.
Okay. Do you have any updates on where Prop 123 stands?
So competing bills in the House and Senate, when I say competing, different ideas about how much would be in Prop 123 from the State Land Trust if it's going to go to the voters. It would have to go to the voters to get extended. And so it could be a continuation of the current structure, could be a revision of the current structure. The governor has outlined what she would like to see happen. Representative Gress and I'm going to forget the name of the senator, have identified what they would like to see, both in the House and Senate. The Republicans want all or the majority of the money to go to teacher pay increases. While I support teacher pay increases, when you earmark the funding that specifically, it has an impact on your certified, your classified, your administrative, every other person who doesn't qualify as a teacher, because a narrow definition of teacher may not include your social workers or your psychologists or your other people who are doing work that is certified in nature but doesn't qualify as teacher. And so our argument has been, yes, we want to provide the increase for our teachers, but we also know that the other people in the system are also important, so allow the districts the flexibility to meet the need in their communities. Elected officials are really good about talking about local control until it comes to actually giving you local control, and then they put a lot of strings on it. So the biggest worry on Prop 123 is that a poison pill will be added that would bake into the approval the permanent structure of ESAs. So if you put in that structure, and it's already $1 billion redirect of taxpayer dollars away from traditional and charter schools, because charter schools also get funded from the state pot. ESAs are actually impacting charters at a greater rate, from what I've been told, than they are district public schools. So we have a shared interest in terms of protecting the money that's available for public education in the state of Arizona. So if the poison pill's there, that would be a problem. Each day that passes where we don't have an agreed upon resolution means that the likelihood of a special election in November for Prop 123 becomes less and less, and that it would get referred to the ballot in 2026. The silver lining is that the budget assumptions and the preliminary budget documents reflect not only the core 123 dollars being baked into what's available for schools, but it includes the $75 million that we were afraid wouldn't be there. If that $75 million doesn't make it across the finish line, it's a $1.3 million hit for Scottsdale. But two different sources have verified, at least in the preliminary budget docs now, it's there. So we might be all right for the next year related to Prop 123, but we do have to advocate for a clean referral to the voters. I would argue that in order to make it as uncomplicated as possible, make it look exactly like Prop 123 was when it passed. But that's my 2 cents.
Speaking of referendums, if for whatever reason Axon does leave Scottsdale, will that affect schools?
So it affects us in a couple of ways. One, I'm pretty sure that we have parents that work at Axon, and if they leave, then we lose kids. So that's a problem. If Axon leaves, it's an impact to our tax base, and it's hard to predict how big that is. Scottsdale has a very healthy tax base. We're one of the non-state aid districts because our tax base is so large. The state determines how much we can collect, but we're funded by our local tax base. Other districts get money from the state. They write a check to them to help cover that because they don't have sufficient taxing power, not enough revenue to be able to cover the amount that they're owed. So if Axon leaves, it's a big hole. How big, I'm not sure, but it could have an impact on the tax rate that has to get levied in Scottsdale in order to make up the difference when Axon is carrying part of that burden for covering our tax liability.
I've heard that all school districts have to sign an affidavit for the State Department of Education saying they have no illegal DEI policies. For example, what's happening with Kyrene's anti-discrimination governing board policy.
I love these questions. You didn't hold anything back, Lisa. So it's true that the U.S. Department of Education has required states and local education agencies to submit 2 documents, not one. One is an assurance related to compliance with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. So it's shorthand. What the letter says is it's an assurance that you're not operating any illegal DEI practices or programs. And they provide a lot of information in there in terms of court cases and other things with respect to, it's not a technical definition. There's a lot of room for interpretation. The other one is an assurance related to FERPA and parental rights that we're complying with the laws there. That one's due April 30th. We've already submitted it. No problem. We can document the response. We also submitted the assurance on not operating illegal DEI programs or practices. We are in compliance with Title VI of the Civil Rights Act. We do not discriminate against people, and I'm happy to say that any day, all day long. We also believe diversity is important, should be celebrated. It's an important part of who we are as a district. We serve a diverse population. We value each and every learner. We value all of our teachers. We don't discriminate based on skin color, gender, LGBTQ status. Those things aren't a reason for us to treat anyone differently. We don't have hiring quotas, which would be a violation from what I've read, but that's not what we have. We do try to recruit diverse candidate pool because we think that it gives us the best possibility of selecting high quality talent for the jobs available in Scottsdale. But no quotas, no targets. We just want to embrace the diversity in our community and support all our learners. And we can sign the assurance confidently because we don't do illegal DEI programs or practices.
Last one, and then you can get out of here. Disappointed to hear reduction in funding to ESS. Will this reduction be long-lasting? What do you see as the effects of this change?
Explain more.
I'm not just...
Yes.
Here.
So at my school, I had heard that we're having a reduction of our ESS staffing and paraprofessionals. And just wondering, I know there seems to be lots of funding questions, but how is that going to be affecting perhaps individual schools' ESS programs or the program as the district as a whole? And is this something that we maybe see as a current dip in funding and we are hopeful that it will return, or is this the new way of our program?
Okay, well, so I would love to have Brooke Williams here to answer it more specificity, so I'm going to give a higher level view because she can talk more about the specifics in terms of our review. But we should always be doing this, but we accelerate the rate at which we review our program structures and offerings and our ability to sustain across our 29 campuses, not only in special education services, but in all services, right? We've looked carefully at our teacher-student ratios. At a time when we had ESSER funding, for example, if we had class sizes that were at 17 to 20, we wouldn't necessarily reduce a teacher and collapse a class. Now we don't have the luxury of being able to carry those lower class sizes that are ideal but really expensive. So we work to staff to the ratio that's been approved by the governing board more consistently. And so those are some of the trade-offs. So when it comes to our ESS programs and support for students with disabilities, we're looking at how we're structured, what's required by the IEPs, because the service plan is driven by the individualized education plans for the students. And we have different programs operating at different schools, different levels of supports that are needed. And so the special ed team has been looking at how do we right-size that, because sometimes things get added over time and then kids move on, right? I mean, when you're at an elementary school, you get them through 5th grade, then they move on. And you may or may not have the same level of needs or challenges coming through the system, but sometimes the staffing stays within those environments. So I think there's been a careful review of that. At the end of the day, we always have to analyze not based on cost, but based on what the IEP requires to meet the needs of our kids with disabilities. And so that's always the final determination. Money is part of it, so we have spent an extraordinary amount since the time I've been here and probably starting before then in contracted services because we couldn't find enough special educators. The premium for hiring contracted services is significant. We're not the only district who's facing this challenge. There are some that have, I mean, in one district that's small, the amount for having one special educator from a contracted services equaled the amount they were paying their superintendent in a salary. That's a problem. And so what we've done is changed our salary structure to be able to bring more people on board internally. But there's other restructuring that it probably doesn't feel good in the moment, but it's designed to right size based on the IEP needs. And then that can always change, because if those change, we can bring on more staff to support. Does that help?
So it sounds like there's not necessarily reduction of funding, but things like ESSER funds that are being removed that don't allow us to be.
Yeah, so where we could be more generous in some staffing allocations, we don't have that additional funding to be able to do so. So we have to be very direct and targeted to make sure we're meeting the needs.
All right, well, thank you. We appreciate you taking the time, and also we're very lucky that we have a superintendent that engages with his parent community, with his SUSD community. So again, thank you for answering all of our questions.
Thank you. Can I say one more quick thing?
Of course.
So because of the topic tonight, I want to give a shout out to Dr. Watt, who's going to be talking to you about AI in education. And I'm going to say just a couple of things about why I think this is really important, and a shout out to Sid, Desert Mountain High School student, who is a real leader in taking on challenges in our community, but also sits on our student advisory board and is part of the conversations about AI in education. So I just want to say that one of the things that I'm thinking about, and I've been to a lot of different sessions and do a lot of reading with respect to artificial intelligence, there's tremendous potential in AI to be able to offload some things for teachers to make their work-life balance better. And it'll take time to figure out what are the right tools, and you'll get some ideas about that from Dr. Watt tonight. But it's one of those things that, when harnessed well, can actually improve the quality of the experience for the teacher and for the student. So the flip side is we can personalize education at a scale we could never do before AI. And so what the technology, as it's continuing to evolve, will allow us to do is to identify what are your interests and passions, what areas are you struggling to master in the content, and to focus and target the supports based on the unique individual learner's needs. And so that a teacher who, if you have 30 kids in the class and you're trying to differentiate your instruction based on somebody who's 2 grade levels above and 2 grade levels behind, pre-AI, that's virtually impossible. And so kids struggled or were frustrated because they either were bored or they just didn't get it, what you were teaching. Now you have the ability with technology to do something that's magical and targeted to their needs. For the students, they can also harness that in ways, but it requires us to be able to teach about ethical, responsible use of artificial intelligence, understand its limitations. So I'm glad you're here. I'm glad it's a topic of conversation, and I think it represents some real opportunities for us as a district to kind of be on the front end of how districts can do this in a way that really makes life better for our teachers and accelerates student achievement.
Awesome. Well, with that being said, we'll hand it over to Dr. Michelle Watt, our Chief Systems Officer. And as Dr. Menzel mentioned, we have a student here, a sophomore, Sid, who's going to speak from the student perspective. So let me.
Thank you. This is going to be super awkward because of the positioning in the room. I do want to give a demonstration. I didn't do a presentation this time. I want to share information with you and show you at least one of the tools that we have to use, and definitely give Sid a chance to share also. So first of all, I have been leading the IT department here in SUSD for the last 4 school years. And I also co-lead our Innovation in Teaching and Learning Strategic Action Team. I like to introduce myself as a recovering kindergarten teacher. I still every now and then have nightmares about the principal coming in to observe, and there's 5 kids in the blocks and 2 in housekeeping, and we all need to be on the rug. But so I really love being able to support the learning that happens in our classroom from this other role as well. And in the Innovation in Teaching and Learning Strategic Action Team, we have a subgroup that is our AI work group. And one of the products that we were able to provide and release last year, last February, in 2024, were our artificial intelligence guidelines in SUSD. So these are, you can see the little breadcrumb trail there. They're on the website under curriculum. You can also go to susd.ai to get to these. And they've been out there for a little bit. Our group just reviewed them recently. We found that actually everything here is still highly relevant and accurate, even our next steps. But there are some links that unfortunately were to valuable resources hosted on the Department of Education, the federal website, that now have been redirected. So we're looking for good resources to replace those with. So if you get a broken link, we are aware, and apologies. Okay, so first I just want to show, so I'm kind of using this as an outline. I'm not going to read it all to you, but drawing attention and outlining our work. This Elevate Education with AI is a resource we provided to teachers at the beginning of the year. It's something that can go on the wall and be pointed out as guidance is given for a specific activity. You know, one of the nice things about having a resource and having the need to talk in every learning activity about, is AI allowed in this activity? And if so, how can we use it? Is that it's really helping the teacher and the student have a conversation about, well, what are we learning in this activity? So in the fall of 2023, I actually met with a group of parents from SPC to get some input on a draft of these. And one of those parents shared an article from, I want to say the 70s, about math teachers being up in arms about calculators and how this was going to ruin the ability for people to do mathematical thinking, and they didn't want calculators in schools. And it was a great parallel for the time we're in now, because on our state math tests, there are certain grade levels where, of course, you can't use a calculator. Your ability to add and subtract is being measured. But when you're taking a math test in high school, there's a calculator built into the testing platform, because that's not what's being measured at that point. That's not the mathematical learning that's being measured. So similarly with activities with AI, talking about how we can use it or not use it is part of focusing on what is the learning. So that's a tool that's available to use. Our guidelines then talk about the definitions of AI and how generative AI works. So I'm mostly going to be talking about generative AI and doing a demonstration with generative AI, but want to be clear that other types of AI have been, and I know many of you have heard this before, have been in the tools we use for a while now. The recommendations we get on Netflix are based on machine learning, which is a kind of artificial intelligence. Our web filter that's on all of our student devices definitely uses AI, because there are new websites popping up all the time, and there are not humans saying, is this an educational website or a really inappropriate website, and categorizing it. It's all done through machine learning. So in regards to generative AI, we've kind of drawn a spotlight on the tools that are going to be allowed to use in the school district that use generative AI, where we're actually producing some text or an image. And we have a section here on data privacy that points out we already have processes in Scottsdale where any learning tool that is brought into the classroom, any digital resource, goes through a review process. Some of those are highly formal curriculum review processes, or if it's a digital tool that we want to use, we're always looking at, do we have another tool that could do this job already? So we're kind of streamlining which resources we use. Or if not, if this is a tool we want to bring into the environment, then we look closely at the data privacy, and we pursue a data privacy agreement with any vendor that's going to have student data in it. So that process already exists. So as all of these new flashy AI websites and tools that Dr. Menzel alluded to are popping up, we have a process to be able to vet those and say, are we going to allow this or not? So one of the things we are doing is saying, well, there are some tools that we've already invested in or we provide training for. So those are the ones that we're not just going to bring every tool that's available into our environment. At the same time, being open to how the field is emerging and what's becoming available, and making sure that if it does make sense to bring something new into our environment, we're doing that same review. All right. There's information here on the potential of AI in education, as well as the educator use of generative AI. I think Dr. Menzel spoke eloquently to that, and I have a demonstration of that. So I want to draw your attention to the student use of generative AI because we noted that the Arizona Educational Technology Standards that were last revised in 2022 include some goals like empowered learner, digital citizen, knowledge constructor, and creative communicator. And those terms are defined at each grade level. What does that look like for those students? And knowing about and being able to use generative AI aligns very well with those standards. All right, we have a section on guidance for schoolwork that really outlines the idea that there needs to be conversations between teachers and students about when generative AI is okay and not okay to use, and that it needs to be very transparent, the use of it. I don't know if anyone in here has had any students recently go off to college, but we hear a lot from our neighbor here, ASU, about how their students already are using AI in their college courses, and they're even going through initial trainings and tutorials that help them understand how this idea of it's not completely wrong, it's not completely okay, it's defined by what is allowed by your teacher. For example, is the Oxford comma allowed in my papers or not? It's defined by your instructor, whether or not that's allowed. So that we're kind of mirroring that practice at the college level. So some of the approved digital resources we have vary for staff and students. Gemini is the generative AI tool that Google produces, and I know they're working on making it available in a version for schools to use with students, but right now it's not allowed for anyone under 18 to use Gemini. So we've been very careful about which tools we make available for which groups of people inside of SUSD to make sure that we're aligning with the requirements of the tool and what's appropriate in our organization. So one of the ones you'll see on here for both is Magic School. That's the tool I'm going to demonstrate tonight. And then I just want to point out Canva. I don't know if any of you have used Canva to create cool, easy images. They have some Magic Studio features to create images or create text. Those are available just for high school at this point. And then Adobe Express for Education, which is an image generator tool. It says coming soon, but it is now available for students in 6 through 12. So those are the generative AI tools that are available broadly in SUSD. All right, so, and then the only things you'll find here, we have some next steps listed and some FAQs. So again, if you want to visit this, it's susd.ai. All right, now for the Magic School demonstration. So Magic School is a tool that's designed to support teachers. Actually, I've also shown demonstrations in the IT department about this tool because it can be used for other staff members as well. And the nice thing about Magic School, there's a really low barrier to entry. I know if you just go to a chat bot, you're kind of faced with just an empty box and you have to type something in there. And I've watched different people their first time typing, and it usually looks a lot like what you'd put in a Google search, because we're all good at doing Google searches. There's a real skill to writing a good prompt for a chatbot. So this tool takes away some of the need for that skill and is a way for our staff members to immediately be getting some good products out. There are so many tools in here, though. I'll just scroll down so you can see that one of my favorite tools is the tool recommender. So this is a tool they created so that you can ask what tool would be best for the activity you want to do. So I'm going to put this down for just a minute while I type and just do a quick demonstration. I'm going to do 5th grade. Will you hold this? All right, so not a great prompt. I just asked as a 5th grade teacher, what tool should I use for extensions? You know, what can kids do when they're done? That is a daily challenge for teachers. All right, so the cool thing is that it tells me some tools I might use as a educator, and it also tells me some tools that could be used for students. I don't like the, there's one in particular I was looking for, and I can tell I didn't give a great prompt, so I'm gonna go back, edit my prompt, and say something else. All right, I even left the spelling mistake there so that we can see how well it understands. So some of the same ideas came up, and the one I was looking for was choice board. This I would have loved to have when I was in the classroom, this choice board tool. So basically then I can say, okay, I'm a 5th grade teacher, what topic am I teaching, and are there any additional details that I want to put in for the choice board? So it takes away some of the, some of the brain drain of coming up with all these different ideas all the time. So I'm just going to do a quick example of how quick and easy that is too. All right, and click generate. And what comes out is some different ways to engage with, maybe we were just learning about the phases of the moon and I had a specific activity I wanted them to do, or maybe I don't have a way for them to apply the learning and I want some ideas. There's a whole bunch of different ideas here, and maybe I choose one of these and that's what we use in the classroom, or I can use this as a starting point to give students choices about how they want to demonstrate their learning. So just showing quickly how easy these tools are to use and how directly applicable they are to the classroom. Now, I want to just give a quick peek into Magic Student. So the teacher view of this is very different from the student view. Students can't actually log into Magic School, they have to be invited. So even though this is available for all students, K-12 and SUSD, if you ask your child if they've used Magic School or Magic Student, they won't have unless their teacher actually set up an activity and invited them to join that room or that activity. That is a pro and a con because, for those teachers that are a little apprehensive and know that students still need to learn some things about the appropriate way to use AI, they know that students can't just go in here and have access to all these tools. But it does mean that we need our teachers to be ready to create these activities for students to engage in. So in Magic Student, a teacher sets up a room and they decide which tools are available to students. To decide which tool, they can scroll through and try out all of these tools. Some of the tools are very similar to the tools that are available to teachers, but some of them are more unique and just for students. And even if the tool is the same, Magic School and Magic Student know the context of if a student's engaging with them or not. So one of our teachers tells a story of how he assigned a tool and the student wasn't getting the results that he wanted because it was a marketing class and the project was on summer films. And the Magic Student thought, this student might be off task, so wasn't giving them an answer. Well, when the teacher asked that same question in their tool, it did give an answer because it thought there's fewer guardrails in place when you're a teacher logged into here. So it is reassuring to know that it is very contextual. It knows the teacher sets it up for the age level of students they're working with, so it's going to give some age-appropriate interactions and responses. And teachers can see the interaction of all of their students. So there's a little bit of AI that will alert the teacher if something really concerning is happening in a chat between the AI and the student, and they can go in and see exactly what that conversation was, or if that's just something they need to grade. Maybe part of the assignment is how you're using AI, and the teacher wants to go in and observe the conversation and give credit that way. So that's one of the reasons we like this tool. I will say that you've probably heard this before, that like today we're using the worst version of AI that we'll ever use, right? It's only going to get better. And one of the ways I think these tools will get better is when they're already embedded in the places that we go. So as we continue to do curriculum evaluations and adoptions, and I believe we'll see more and more products coming to us where it's a math curriculum and it has an AI component built in to help students to get feedback on their math while they're working in the adopted curriculum. So this, going to a separate tool to be able to interact with an AI chat, I mean, that may exist in some way down the road, but also it will be in the places we're already going for learning. Yeah, yeah, in any of the, so, that's one of the questions we ask our vendors is like, what's your roadmap for AI? What does that look like? And some of them can answer that question well, and some of them not as well, so, yeah.
Can you show us what Dr. Menzel described about using it to tailor to students who may need to accelerate or may need extra attention? How can that be used?
So this tool is best at that from the teacher standpoint and giving the teacher some recommendations. So there might be a tool in here where I can get a recommendation for an activity for remediating a standard and then, enriching beyond that standard. But also he's talking about that being right in the learning tool. One of the learning tools that we are piloting in SUSD is Conmigo. You've probably heard about that one. So it's linked with Khan Academy, and so it's a personalized tutor that's part of a learning resource. So part of the information then that the personalized learning tutor has is how you just did on some of the math problems you did, or some of the science questions you asked, or a science demonstration that you just interacted with. And so then those questions and that support are right there and available for feedback. So some of the student ones may do this as well, but in that context where there's the learning activity and the chatbot, it's going to be able to ask the student questions, give them feedback, and then based on what the student is saying, either challenge their learning, or do some remediation. Yeah, good question. All right, I don't want to steal all of Sid's time, so I'm going to let him share now.
Hello. So I wanted to share a bit about how we've been using AI in our classrooms, even like outside of Magic School. So one popular application that our math teacher has been doing is on like certain problems. What we can do is we can give an AI a picture of like our homework. Like let's say we're doing Unit 8, Lesson 5, right? We give it a picture of our homework, and let's say I'm struggling on that unit. What I can do is say, hey, give me questions that are similar to this so that I can practice more. And it'll give me like 10 more questions that are of the same concept, doing the same things, but they're different so that I can learn it better. Another thing we've been doing, for example, is in like a history class when we're writing an essay. We can use ChatGPT to get sources for our essay. So rather than just Google sourcing it, you can get personalized sources in the bottom part of most chatbots that you can then use to actually cite in essays. Another thing for like AP exams, one of the things you have to do in the history one is like a long essay question or a document-based question. The problem with that is there's not many like prompts that are available just by Google searching or that your teachers can give. So if you feed a machine learning model existing prompts that you already have, you can get new ones to then practice on yourself. So it really just allows you to take the resources that you have and like get more of them, multiply them basically. For coding, for example, it's great for debugging stuff. So if you have like an error where the code is not in the right folder and therefore it's not being able to run properly in the test file, a chatbot would be able to help you debug that issue without having to email your teacher and all of that. So those are just some of the like ways that we've been using it in our classroom. Obviously, there are going to be like some teachers who are a bit apprehensive of it and who are a bit slower to implement it. You'll mainly see those in the English department, just because like mainly students have been known to use AI on like generating essays and stuff. But I think that our English teachers, at least mine, have started to warm up to the idea of AI in that classroom. Like if we're doing like reading comprehension about a novel that we have, you can use AI to give you a quick 1-minute summary of the chapters that were assigned just before you have a quiz, like in passing period or something like that. Or if there's a certain question that we have like in a Socratic, they can give you more like in-depth analysis of it using actual quotes from the novel. So that's like some ways that teachers have like started to integrate it, but I think in the future it'll become more hands-on, especially with the Magic Schools tool now that it's being more widely publicized to staff and teachers. But yeah.
As a student, what do you think the biggest issue is that you're like experiencing? Because I know parents are like, "Oh, cheating," but what do you think it is?
The biggest problem with AI usage, it's other AI tools are very unregulated. They can also sometimes be misleading. Newer models of AI have been less misleading, but they are prone to making errors, and then just it being unregulated. At least with tools like Magic Schools, they are going to be more regulated and stuff like that. And then also for kids, sometimes they don't know how to write the right prompts for it, so they're not sure how to format their questions in the right ways. But that's something that Magic School does well because it can turn like a basic thing that you're saying into an actual good prompt that you get a decent response from.
Any other questions? I just wanted, oh. Wow. Oh.
Is anybody measuring the sort of the delta between traditional learning and learning with AI? My personal concern as a parent is not necessarily cheating, but not learning critical thinking, or perhaps not being exploratory on their own by relying on ChatGPT to give them information. For example, they'll never go to the library and discover a book if they could just, ChatGPT gives it to them.
That's a really great question. And yes, there's not, in SUSD, we're not taking students and saying, you get to use AI to learn and you don't, and we're going to see who does better. There are some, maybe ethical challenges with that, but definitely that's happening. And one of the things that some of the teachers who are teacher researchers across the nation who are using this with their students is they're finding a different kind of thinking. Some of them are calling it like possibilities thinking. Like instead of, it's changing a little bit the nature of the inquiry that's happening. Instead of the teacher saying, here's the question, you go find, even an open-ended question where there's many answers, it's one of the things they're seeing is that it might be a broader topic, and students are coming up with some of their own questions as well. And so I think it's a different kind of thinking. But again, I think I think that there's the potential here to really evaluate our state standards broadly. You know, when is it important to learn something like a 5-paragraph essay structure and be good at that to whatever level that means? And when do we move past that because that's a basic skill that technology can do for us now? So it's a good question. Yeah.
One thing I think is so interesting with that in particular is with things like Conmigo, they don't, like, the AI doesn't give the answer. And I think that's important. So I think what the districts are allowing students to use is really addressing that, like, can they think on their own? And so things like this and Conmigo, like, it's never going to give that third grader the answer. It's just going to keep challenging their thought process till the kid gets to the answer. And I think that's when AI is used so beautifully in a school setting versus like ChatGPT. Third, fourth, fifth, sixth, they're not using ChatGPT in the classroom, right? They might be using it at home, but that's where I think that critical thinking element is so important to like understand what's actually being taught to the kids is age appropriate. So.
I was just wondering with, like, as it's going into Magic School Enterprise and, like, using chats, like, I love the idea of helping kids learn how to do good prompts. Like, is that going to be part of, like, the discussion within the classroom, too? You might have already, like, alluded to that. But I do think that's, like, I see even, like, in the workplace these days, you can tell which people know how to do, like, good prompts and, like, use it as an assistant and which ones struggle. So I see it as being really exciting if we can help give our kids an edge of, like, knowing how to create good prompts and using AI in their future work environment. So
I
is
completely
that part
agree.
of
So
it?
do you have
Sorry.
anything to say about that?
There are tools on Magic Schools like to help with prompts. I think it'd be useful for like teachers to explain that directly, just because
Yeah.
like it sounds better coming like one-on-one if a teacher
Yeah.
is saying that. But yeah, you can like tell the difference between somebody who is able to use it effectively by saying the right prompts. There's also like a decent amount of like YouTube videos on how to like do how to get the best prompts out of ChatGPT or other chatbots.
Yeah, but that seems like another level of like a new way of critical thinking of like how do I leverage this
To get to my
technology
goal.
to get to my goal. I think
Yeah.
that seems really exciting. if
And
use it
we're in
that
such
way.
an interesting moment because as adults, we're also learning that at the same time. And so I think what's awesome about teachers broadly is that we are very observant of ourselves as learners. And so as our teachers are using these tools and realizing the barriers and the learning curves and the challenges they have, I know that that will translate into helping students to be more effective at it. Mm-hmm. You would think.
So mine's maybe not a question, more of a comment. So I'm a teacher, 8th grade math, and I will admit I'm very slow to get on the AI train. Like I'm that teacher, that you said is very slow to like. I'm hesitant not because of the cheating, but I appreciate some of the resources that you've mentioned. Like, oh, I use it for this. I need extra practice, or I need those things. But the concern I have is when it's used widely in classrooms for an activity where students are sitting and staring at a screen. So the mom in me and teacher, I really do not love how much time our students are spending with a screen in the classroom, and then they're going home and they have homework that requires them to also be on the screen. I'm maybe a little bit traditional in that sense, but it's a major concern of mine how much time. And then to your point a bit, I'm sure a lot of you've heard of that book, Anxious Generation. It's kind of I haven't read it. It's on my Amazon wish list, but I just recently listened to an interview with the author, and I really understand his point of, I gave this example with my daughters. They wanted to play Minecraft Education because they have access to it on their school devices. They don't have their own devices in my house, but they have their school issue device that has to go back and forth every day. And I said, after listening to that, I said, I don't like that they go into their room in isolation, they shut the door and they want to play. So I said, you can play next to each other on your devices. And they got so much more out of it. They were interacting with each other, but also playing. So It's not a question. It's a concern that I hope the district is weighing the pros and cons, because when you look at the social aspects and what the skills that some of our students are missing, there's wonderful things that can come out of this, but it's also frightening to me in that sense.
I love that you shared that, because that is a concern, absolutely. And there's the current leader of the International Society for Technology and Education gives an example. He compares this to the idea of vegetables and eating your vegetables. Like, we don't, when we think about how to eat healthy, we don't think about the amount of time we're spending eating, and we don't care what happens during that time. We know that we need to have a balanced diet. And so, yes, the time is a factor, and in our classrooms, we need to be creating all kinds of learning experiences. And but the other thing is to think about how we're using the screens. I have really high weekly reports on my device for screen time. And I'm really upset about it, because a lot of that's audiobooks. When I'm driving, I'm listening to audiobooks. When I'm cleaning, I'm listening to audiobooks. And I really value the reading time that I do. Do I spend too much time on Words with Friends? Also, probably. But I know that the time I'm using my device isn't all equal, and that some of it is okay to have a lot of and some of it not. And so I think that's something we need to be helping students to learn as well. Definitely. Thank you.
Can you talk about the teacher training that's going to happen for getting the educators up to speed, how long it's going to take if the curriculum is developed or when it's going to be developed? And also, the same way we teach kids about the dangers of drugs in school, or is there going to be a workshop, or I'm not sure what they call it anymore, where you go down to the gymnasium, but also like the dangers of over-relying and cheating yourself out of learning. I just saw a TikTok about a girl who got fired from her job as a developer because she wasn't actually a very good developer, a software developer. And I think she probably got through college over-relying on things like ChatGPT to develop her code and to debug her code. So,
yeah. Yeah, so it's one thing we have done this last year. We have what we call SUSD fundamentals, which are a training that every staff member participates in the classroom and out. And one of our fundamentals this year was AI in education. And so it laid a baseline for all of our educators about some of the advantages, some of the perils, that we have guidelines, that we have approved tools, what they are. And we have done more invitational trainings directly on AI and using it in the classroom. The thing that we've found is most successful is when it's not necessarily come learn about AI, but hey, English teachers that all teach 9th grade, let's talk about what AI means in the context of your curriculum and your teaching. So, some of it we're still learning. We're doing pilots. We're learning about the things that are out there. We're learning from some of our innovators, because we have some teachers who want to use every new thing, and we have others who this really needs to be in the curriculum product that they use every day, because that's the way we'll have it everywhere, is when it becomes a little more mainstream like that. So it's, so I can't say, oh, there's, a day that that everyone's going to be doing AI in June. Are there trainings in our June training that are just focused on AI, or that are just focused on AI in the ELA classroom? Yes, those kinds of things are happening, and we also need to be able to tailor it to each individual, and make sure that it's in the context of what they're learning. All right, I had one thing I wanted to announce if we're almost wrapping up. Okay, so right now there is a national survey going on that SUSD is going to participate in. There's a group called Project Tomorrow that does speak up surveys. They've been doing surveys nationally on technology and education for over a decade. So we're going to be sharing links that are SUSD specific, so that not only can our voices be part of a survey on AI in education, but then we'll have access to the data about our community and what our high school students or our teachers or our administrators, their hopes and dreams and fears about AI, their experience with it, all of those things. So just wanted to, I know you all are highly engaged and grateful for it, so wanted to make sure that you're aware that that's coming out. It will likely be its own message in Parent Square, inviting families to participate. Also in the source that comes out the beginning of May. The survey goes through the end of June, but it will be used to help inform next steps and future things, because we, to your question also about how are we helping teachers to have more skills and tools around this to use in the classroom, we also need to go at the pace that that will support change for them, because there's a lot on their plate without having to think about how to add AI to their classroom. And so that feedback will definitely help us be able to gauge those steps.
All right, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you. There we go. Okay, moving on. Are there any SPC reps here that have any announcements that they'd like to make? Leanne?
Very excited to report that with our recent donation from Copper Ridge, that we have reached our fundraising goal for our funding goal from our schools for next year.
That could be a first. Thank you. And then I'm not a CocoPa SPC rep, but I am a CocoPa mom. And recently, they were just Blue Zone approved. They'll have their ribbon cutting next Tuesday, which is also Earth Day. So we're just excited to add another school onto the SUSD list of Blue Zone approved schools. So, okay. So for executive board updates, I'll just quickly go through. Pardon? Well, it's okay. So quickly, I'll go through just 3 bills that are important education bills. The first is SB 1437, which deals with mandatory reporting. This has already been signed by the governor, and 2 new things that it adds to mandatory reporting is that only a forensic interviewer who's had the proper training may interview a student. So it can't be like an SRO, it can't be a teacher or a principal, it has to be a specially trained forensic interviewer. And then another change is that it adds school district governing boards and charter school governing boards to the list of who becomes a mandatory reporter. Next, we have HB 2164. This is public schools banning ultra-processed foods. This has gotten a lot of coverage in the news. Since these slides were made, the governor actually signed this bill on Monday, so that will become law. And lastly, we have SB 1508, which is an anti-bullying law providing clear definitions of what's bullying and cyberbullying. And honestly, when I look through this, it's pretty much exactly the same as SUSD's governing board policy on bullying, so not going to change much for us. Okay, today is the deadline if you want to nominate yourself or nominate someone else for the 2025-2026 school year. If you use the link, it'll take you to the different positions that we have and a brief description of what time requirement, responsibilities. So again, tonight, if you're interested, very exciting. And lastly, our final roundtable of the year will be April 30th from 11 to noon here in the MDA. And this kind of came up because there have been a few issues recently, and parent organizations not knowing how to respond to a direct request to them for assistance from a family or from students. So this will kind of help give clarification on that. And for our May meeting, last meeting of the year, we're going to have Christine Harrington, our Director of Marketing and Communications, and we're going to kind of try to get her to talk about, I mean, I feel like a lot of our schools have to, because we have schools of choice within SUSD, we have schools, our own schools, competing against each other and trying to have that selling point and something special about them. So hopefully she can talk to that. Our budget, and as Leanne mentioned, so this, we are at $950 with our school donations, and to update it, Leanne was letting us know that Copper Ridge donated $100. So as you can see, we are now over what we budgeted for school donations. So thank you. Last, I hate asking for money, but since we are a 501c3 nonprofit, the only way we can operate is through donations and grants, and I'm sure you've seen this pie graph many times. Our two biggest expenses are mandatory insurance, which we absolutely have to have if we want to have meetings here, and then website and email. So we're not, going on extravagant trips or anything with the money. And lastly, this we can, as I said, Zelle is a new way to donate. We also have Venmo, and then the address to write the check to. So if you're so inclined, they are tax deductible as well. We'd love to keep SPC running. It's been going for 48 years, so we'd love to keep it going. I think, yep, that is it. Get out a little bit early, but thank you everybody for coming. If you have any questions about this or anything else about SPC, you can email president@scottsdaleparentcouncil.org. So thank you, everybody.